Hello, and welcome to today's After Church Tea Time. My name is Deanna, and today I am joined by Andia and Hannah. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Today we will be discussing a great sermon by Laurentiu and Alexandra, How Your Mistakes Help You Grow. So, ladies, how are you feeling today, and what were some of your insights and takeaways from today's sermon?
For me, I feel like it hit really close to home, as these sermons usually do. But in my own personal journey, I've been working on like letting go of that voice of ego that, makes your mistakes seem like some grave error that you've done. And um, it was very healing for me to just, because with my coach, I've been working on having compassion, but I feel like there's times where I don't even realize that I'm, being hard on myself, or that I'm resisting that. Like once I realized, I've made a mistake, a lot of times my first reaction is just to be kind of defensive, like, oh, I've done nothing wrong, or, oh, it's kind of like that deflection sort of energy. And so there were a few times, this weekend where I caught myself doing that. And, last night I was thinking about this very topic, like, is it really a mistake if it's just leading you closer to yourself? And just feeling, the love that they both had, and, talking about these things, and just hearing again for myself that it's safe. Like, a mistake is not even a mistake. It's, an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. But that inner child, sometimes she forgets. And so it was very comforting to me. I feel like I just really needed to hear this even more, to just go deeper in my own healing. Especially today, I woke up not feeling very very good. And so I was doing a lot of mirror exercises before the sermon started. And I feel like it just helped me open up my heart even more. Because I think my biggest thing is just like letting go of my resistance, which I know is like a very old pattern of mine, like from my family, like this prideful, like, oh, I've done nothing wrong, how dare you say this to me type thing. But it's like that blocks you from like really healing. And so for me, it was good in that way, of just reminding myself, like, it really is safe. You can put all these patterns away.
Yeah, well, I can relate to everything you just said there. And I feel like this sermon was totally perfect timing for me as well. And just what I've been going through and when I've been healing has been kind of a lot of, the past coming up in my thoughts and in my consciousness, like out of nowhere. And kind of just been healing through that and kind of being like, I cancel this thought and just doing the mirror exercise and like loving myself in those places. But like to be able to hear this today was really healing. And to be able to we know like mistakes help us learn, but like when you're thinking about them, it can be so difficult to like bring yourself to that other place. And so having that line of questions today to be asked and just be able to say yes to all of them, like, like, of course, I couldn't have known back then what I know now. And like, for me, I get caught up on kind of what Alexandra was saying too, of like, but I did know, I just made the opposite choice of my intuition. And like, I loved what she said about how that was just teaching you to like trust yourself more and like trust your intuition more. And yeah, that was really powerful for me to hear and to recognize like, oh, okay, like even though I may have gone against what my intuition was saying, like that was just helping me to like understand more about like who I am and like what I actually value and like giving me that chance to make the opposite choice the next time around, and like being honed by our mistakes, and like being able to like fine tune ourselves by like not beating ourselves up about mistakes, because like it's okay, like it's totally normal, like it's part of the learning process. And like you said, and like they said in the sermon, and like we are totally safe to make them. And yeah, for me, I definitely have been one to feel horrible about making this any sort of mistake. And so yeah, this was really powerful for me to hear today, and like really, really healing, and definitely got me to a place of deeper peace within myself, and like deeper confidence in myself too. Like I felt more confidence come through, and yeah, like I feel like almost like more empowered to be able to like make a different choice after a mistake now than I had like before watching. So that was really nice too.
Yeah, I resonate so much with what both of you shared, like so much so that I don't even know where to start. But I think for me, like, yeah, it's like what both of you said, is being hard on yourself, right? When you're making that mistake. I worked through that a lot. And it's the shame and the guilt that keeps us stuck, right? And I've been learning how to like let go of that shame, of that guilt, recognizing that God wouldn't have that for me, right? God wouldn't want me to sit in shame. Like all I have to do is make a new choice. And like it's been coming up a lot for me in my life purpose, because like I work in accounting and with people's taxes and things like that. And so I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself. Like if I make a mistake, someone could end up owing a lot of money, right? Like it's important for me to be accurate, right? And mistakes can have consequences. And what I'm learning is that, like, as I go deeper in my life purpose, I'm learning that God is the expert, right? And it's okay for me to surrender that to Him and allow God to move through me, and that my mistakes are me learning, and that I always have the opportunity to make a new choice. And one of the things that came up for me, like as I've been processing this and watching the sermon, is like, well, what are my clients gonna think? You know, like what are other people gonna think when we make these mistakes? But it's but I have to mirror that, right? It's not necessarily what they think, it's how I think and how I'm choosing to move forward and make a new choice. And really, as I've been making a new choice, I realized that what people really want, what clients really want, is someone who can own their mistakes and then correct it going forward. They don't want perfection, you know, they just want honesty. So yeah, I there was so much to unpack with this sermon. And I resonate with what both of you have shared there.
You mentioned that word perfection, and I was thinking about because I'm like sociologist, criminologist by training, and so my mind always goes to like, you know, how does like the greater environment influence us all? And I think like especially within American culture, there's like this idea that you have to be perfect, you have to look a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. And I think like with social media, it's even more amplified now with like all these filters that people use for their pictures, and just, you know, constantly posting things to like give off a demeanor that they're happy and they're content and their life is fabulous. But, you know, usually it's like, you know, that's not the case. And it's so easy to just like fall into that, you know, sort of pattern, because we're all kind of socialize in the social world, and we learn things, you know, growing up. And you know, that's where I have the compassion for myself, because, you know, finding this work, you know, being part of unionism and just living your life in this way where you're putting God first, and your biggest concern is your relationship, you know, with your creator. Like, it's everything else that you've learned in the past just like goes out the window. And it's just kind of like remembering that we are eternal beings, but yet, you know, we've constructed this world that is very limited and believes in death and believes in like an end of things. And I think that's why these mistakes become so amplified for people, because, you know, they believe in an end. They believe that like one day they're gonna die. And I think a lot of people think like that's the end of it. Or even if they don't think that's the end of it, you know, there's a lot of fear around death and dying. And so, at least for me, I think in the past it's put so much, you know, I've struggled with just feeling safe in general in my life. And I think that definitely plays, I think that's why I've been so unforgiving of myself in the past, because, you know, like, oh, I was in this really bad relationship a long time ago, like this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. But realizing that you're divine, and that every experience that you've had isn't even necessarily like a reflection of who you really are. I think that's been like the biggest game changer, and like really letting these things go. Because when I mean, and I grew up in like a spiritual family, but there wasn't really like a true acknowledgement of like your divinity, or even like cultivating it. It was very dogmatic, even though it was, you know, kind of spiritual. And so I think like learning these things and like learning to cultivate that in my everyday life has really helped. And even when I have hard moments, like I feel like it's easier now to like be able to let go of it, because I have tools, and it's like I know the truth of who I am. And so to me, it might feel like some horrible thing that I've done, but in truth, like God doesn't see it that way. God, you know, He's created me. I'm sure He knows exactly what I will be doing, what I won't be doing. You know, it's like your Father always knows. And just realizing that it's a totally different sort of relationship now, that even if, you know, you make a mistake, the only reason why you're being called to that is so you can learn and like love yourself deeper, which is very different than my experiences in the past, where, you know, people have brought up my mistakes, but as a way to like hold it over my head, or, you know, have some sort of like power over me, like, oh, you did this, so you're not good enough, and so, you know, I'm gonna do it, or, you know, whatever. You know, that would always be like a common thing, especially when I was a kid. Like older adults just felt like they knew better, and then everything I did was like not good enough. But it's really just like remembering that that kind of relationship is not a real relationship, and it's really safe just to trust your inner self, and to know that, you know, like whatever is coming up is meant to come up, because there's a true desire for you to come back to love, and just like come back to the truth of like who you are and what your purpose on this life, in this life, is.
Yeah. Wow. The whole time you were talking, I was mentally like, yes, yes, like just cheering it on, because it was so much truth, and that was awesome. And I related to so much of it. And um, yeah, and one thing that really stood out to me was like, don't know, remember exactly how you said it, but maybe it was like they're not even, this is just what came to me. They're not even like our mistakes necessarily. Like it's almost like unlearning the mistakes of like the ego programming that we were taught, and like that we were like given when we were raised. And that kind of just like helped me to kind of realize like why I may have made different mistakes or different choices in the past. And like, you know, going into a relationship I knew from the start wasn't the one for me. But like I look back and I'm like, oh, well, it was kind of like my programming. Like I was raised in like a Catholic household, and like he was Catholic, and like it just like everything kind of just fit, and like our families were happy about it, and like all of this. But now like with my twin flame, it like all makes so much sense. And it's like um of course, like I knew in my heart from the very start that it wasn't him, like it wasn't my twin. But like because of like that old patterning, and that, you know, I had a lot of unhealed trauma and things from childhood that I hadn't looked at when I met him. Um and yeah, so it's like really obvious as to why I made that choice. But it was definitely like to awaken me to like where I am now, because it wasn't healthy. Turned out to be pretty codependent, and like lots of mistakes were made on both ends. But like now I realize like it was just God showing us like what we really needed to heal if we wanted to be with like our true loves individually. And yeah, and I'm like so grateful for the experience, and like that it brought me to where I am now. And that now, like you said, like since I have the awareness of like we are eternal beings, like I know in my next lifetime I'm not going to have to go through that again, because I learned it and I healed it. And like you know, like just like I think Jeff and Shalia say somewhere, like eventually all twin flames can just like meet at like 18 years old and get married, or like get married at 18 years old, because all that healed stuff will be taken care of. And like we won't have to go through extended periods of separation anymore until like our 20s or 30s or 40s. And like yeah, so that's like just a beautiful little piece of like what we're working towards, I guess. But in the meantime, like all of the mistakes that we're healing right now, it's like yeah, it's only bringing us like closer to God, and like closer to where he wants us to be, and to like heaven on earth. And like just healing. And yeah, and like it's not something that has to be the end of the world and like cause so much pain and suffering and guilt and shame. It's nice to have this work and just be able to let that all go, and like be like, you know, like no, like I'm not choosing that anymore for myself. Like I'm a human being, but I'm also a divine being, and I get to say no to those, you know, those feelings, bring love there, and instead make a new choice when it comes up again, and co-create with God. And like no longer do we have to like live in a state of I was going to say like the Matrix, where like kind of just have to live inside your little bubble, and like not think about your feelings, and go to work and come home. And it's just, it's so different now, like that the teachings of union are in the world. And it's really beautiful to like have them, like have these tools to be able to heal ourselves and come closer to God every day, and use our mistakes to come closer to God. Like it's almost like each mistake is like a, you know, like a token on our like journey to like bring us closer, because like they're like the blocks. Each one, each upset that we heal, each mistake we make, and then make a new choice, it's like just building our foundation deeper for heaven and for harmonious union. And yeah, so it's, this sermon was definitely like a great shift in perspective on mistakes for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you brought up relationships, because it makes me think about like a false twin flame dynamic. And I'm moving through this, transcending this, that like being upset because I feel like I may have been in a false twin flame dynamic, and just kind of feeling like, oh, what was the point of that? Right? To go through that whole thing just to find out that I was mistaken and thinking that this person was my twin flame. But what I realized is like going through that, I got a lot of clarity, right? There was clarity on the other side. And now I'm a lot more clear on what I actually want in a relationship and from a romantic partner. And like you were saying, Hannah, like our upbringing has a lot to do with the choices that we made when we were making those mistakes, quote unquote, right? And it's just kind of like having compassion for myself, right? And recognizing that, yeah, I made those choices when I was uninformed, when I didn't have the teachings of Union, and I had an opportunity to grow. I had an opportunity to learn and get to know myself more and come closer to God. And that it was worth it, right? Just to have that clarity, it was worth it to go through all of that, knowing that I don't have to do it again. Like you said, like once I've healed it, I can move on. Um, and it kind of makes me think about something that Jeff said in the live class today, where he was saying that the only difference between us now and our future self is our willingness to change, right? And not like change in the sense that we're not already perfect, but change in raising our vibration and choosing to be closer to God. Like we can have everything we want now. It's just a matter of raising our vibration to that and purifying our consciousness. And the only way we can really do that is to be okay with making mistakes and learning to get that clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you guys both said makes me think about my own past relationships. And, when I first started working with my ascension coach, there was just so much shame around being in certain relationships. One, in particular, just because it was for so long. And, in my heart, I knew he was not, he was not my twin flame. He was not the person for me, but there was so much fear of like leaving because I didn't want to be alone, because I was so like out of touch with myself that it felt better or easier to just stay in a bad relationship, because the alternative like totally freaked me out of just like being alone and not knowing, what's going to happen. And obviously that is not, the truth. Like we're all created with a twin flame. God doesn't want us to be alone. He created us to be together. And it's like, to me, it's just so interesting and so like fascinating how, because right now my twin and I are in separation. We're like healing a lot of things around that. And this was like my biggest fear, was to like just be on my own, physically. Like I know that we're always together, but like physically be on my own and to like face life and all the things around life, by myself, so to say. And now I look back and, if it wasn't for that relationship that I wasn't supposed to be in, and like you mentioned, I think Hannah or Deanna. Is that how I pronounce your name? Okay, good. I think it was you actually, Deanna. But it's like these things. It's giving you the contrast to know, what you actually want. And Jeff has said it a lot in the TFAS classes. Like it's just pushing you closer to the thing that you actually want. The depression, the sadness, like the hopelessness. It's just moving you towards joy. It's moving you towards hope. And now I'm in a place in my life where I've like totally just surrendered everything to God. And like there's just like so much, and I never thought I would say this, there's just like so much peace in like not knowing how things are gonna happen, like I used to drive myself crazy, like just trying to control everything and like not realizing that, I am enough. Like this moment right now with, all the things that maybe might not be ideal, like even this moment, is enough, because in reality, our lover is always with us. God is the number one. And For me too, a lot of it has just been like letting go of this attachment that I have to how things should look, and how I want my life to be, instead of just like giving it to God and trusting that he knows better. And I used to think that like letting go would mean like letting go of all my dreams, that nothing's actually ever going to come to fruition if I don't like consciously try to control something about it. But in actuality, it does the total opposite. It takes you further away from what you actually desire, which for all of us here is like truly just like to be with God. That's why I think we've all come here, because it's not an easy task to heal yourself. It's not an easy thing to like see your twin flame doing something so ridiculous and just accepting it, because he's a part of you, and learning that that is love. Like that is the true meaning of love. It's not like these rainbows and butterflies, sort of like, ooh, everything feels great, but it's like I mean, that is part of it, but it also means like going to the places that are very, very uncomfortable. And all the all the shadow work that we do, like it's shining a light on all those places that like I personally have ignored for years, because of past relationships. And now it's like I'm in this place where I'm just like, I don't even know, God, you just show me, because literally everything that I've thought was the right way is not the right way. So if my twin and I have to be in separation, then I have accepted that. Like I have found the joy in my life, just like living on my own. And I know that my life is going to continue getting deeper, like whatever it looks like. And so like I don't know, there's such a freedom and blessing in that, even though I still have days like this morning where I just woke up feeling like, really bad. Like I have a tool to use to like get past that. And it's just like really, really remembering that, because like for years my past relationships have haunted me, and it's really uplifting to feel that that energy is like moving out, like I'm still moving through it, but it doesn't feel as like heavy as it did like a year ago.
Nice. Yeah. And this one part was coming to me of like, yeah, like the more present we are, like like you were saying, like in the present moment, like the less and less the mistakes even are in our consciousness, and like that stuff all just gets like cleaned out by being in the present moment no matter what we're doing. And that's definitely something I'm still learning and working on. And um yeah, and like by choosing to be present, choosing to heal, like you're saying, it's not like an easy thing to do. And like we can have so much compassion for ourselves for like every single thing we've done and chosen to do. And like, I mean, half of the world doesn't even think about their mistakes because they don't even have time probably to like slow down and just like be present with how they really feel. Like, um, I guess so it's almost a blessing in a way to be able to recognize like, oh, I made a mistake there, and to heal whatever guilt or shame or embarrassment or whatever comes up with it. Cause like we're healing it and we're doing the work and like making a new choice and choosing to be present with love. Um and yeah, like it'll feel like I heard this somewhere, but I'm paraphrasing, but and it's definitely from Jeff and Shalia at some point too, something similar. But when they say like how they've been together in one of the classes, I think like 4 years, now it's like 7 years they've been married, but they say like they don't even remember their life in separation. Like it's like such a different reality. And to me, like that's so beautiful and cool and like powerful, just because like what we're working towards, like harmonious union, is like such a different like reality that like once we're there, it's like going back to separation or like not choosing love is like not even going to be an option like in our minds anymore. And like that's yeah, really profound to me, and like nice to have the role models, our gurus that we do have, get to see like their experience with all of this. And like, with I remember class 2 where Shalia said like sorry to God or something, for she said she made a mistake while doing work, and she was like, oh, sorry God, like because I made a mistake. And God just said, for what? Like he didn't even see it. Like he had no idea what she was saying sorry for, because he didn't see it at all. And so that's just like a really cool way to look at like how God sees us. I think, Andia, you said something like that. Like God doesn't see our mistakes at all. Like he just sees our divinity and our perfection. And like, yeah, like we can just say like, screw off ego, like I'm a divine being, and like I'm not going to listen to you because like my creator doesn't even hear when I make a mistake. And yeah, so I love that.
Yeah, both of you made like really good points that I wanted to touch on. I think Andia, you were saying, and what was it? Oh, you were talking about surrender, and like when you choose this path, yeah, like you have to totally surrender what you think is right or wrong to God and just say, hey, I don't know anything. Like, God, you tell me what to do next, right? And yeah, I've been learning that on this journey, that I'm really like, I feel like a baby in this work because it's so different from what I grew up learning. And there's so much that I have to unlearn. So I just have to be in this total state of, I know nothing, God, you know everything, and just be in that state of surrender. And then I feel, Hannah, like you made a really good point that made me think more about presence. Like, yeah, it's true that we have to be, I feel like if we were more present, and Andia, you were talking about this too, like if we were more present with our feelings, we would probably make less mistakes, right? Because like the mistakes happen, now that I'm kind of processing this, the mistakes happen when we're not being present, when we're not like trusting our intuition, right? Or listening to God's voice, or we're kind of doubting or something like that. But if we chose to be more present, just in the moment, and like slow down, listen to God's voice, listen to our intuition, and really feel our feelings in the moment, in any moment, we'd probably be less prone to making those mistakes, right? And so I thought that was really profound.
So I want to ask you both, how do you slow down in the moment? Because I've been actively working on just being more present and learning to slow down. So what are your like tools, your everyday tools?
Yeah, I think for me, like it's literally stopping, taking a breath. And I've also been reading a book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. He talks about like distinguishing the mind slash ego from
Mhm.
the soul, or like who we are in God. And so like what he kind of talks about is that you have to silence the mind. And so I've kind of been practicing that. Like my mind is thinking these things, my mind is saying these things, but what am I really saying? I'm the observer. I am one who is with God, one with God. And yeah, I think that helps, just to kind of recognize that your mind, like recognize the mind chatter versus what's coming from within, or from within God. And it also helps when you kind of combine it with the mirror exercise too. So that's my take.
Yeah, I love that. That's super helpful for me too. And I'd say like I need to work on this as well. But I mean, I've been trying to implement like 15-minute meditations again into my routine, and like uh love yoga, and like what else? Mirroring, like, yeah, it's, and oh, and then yeah, like you were saying too, I really have been like trying to acknowledge like these thoughts are not me, and like cancel that thought, and like I put love in that place, and like just like being more aware of like thoughts that are coming up that are just not of me. And like you said, like we're one with God, and like going into that place inside that's like knows the truth, and like not allowing the other parts to affect me as much. But like I honestly feel most present when I'm like doing something. I feel present when I'm doing something like yoga, or like even if I'm working and just like working on something and like trying to get into that flow and like letting go. I want to start doing like more art again, because I feel like art was like such a cool way to just get present and everything. And but yeah, it's definitely something like I'm working on and can use like all the tips on too. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you to you both. I definitely will. I agree. Like mindfulness, I've been implementing um, some like daily meditations and observing, and rather than like attaching and trying to like be part of the weird narrative that's going on in my mind. Um, but yeah, definitely like sports, physical activity, and art. I will say those things too are very grounding. My art is more so poetry, so I've been trying to just write more. I've kind of I stopped for a while doing that, but um, I'm getting back into it because there's like as I'm healing, there's like this need to just write and express myself um, even more. So thank you both for sharing.
Yeah, I feel like it also has to do with like Hannah, you were kind of talking about this, like doing what you love, right? Doing what feels good. And like honestly for me, like I feel really good when I am probably working on a puzzle, but also like when I'm working in Excel sheets. I I know that sounds like what, but yeah, when I'm like working in Excel sheets and I can like really like reconcile things, and yeah, just doing whatever feels passionate, like, and is aligned with your life purpose. I feel like that's when we're most in the present moment and God is like really moving through us. And you can kind of tell when it feels like, oh, I don't really enjoy this, or I'm not really passionate about this. Right. And then, yeah, just making a new choice and doing what does feel good. Or like taking a walk or something like that helps me too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Love walks. Like last summer, I was walking like every morning for like an hour, and like, but like you're saying, Andrea, like it's it's okay. I feel like it's good to bring up. Like it's okay to like do, like you said, to do poetry, like wanting to get back to it. Like I want to get back to my walks, but like I found like it's okay, like whatever phase I'm in, like of life, like I don't have to like beat myself up for not doing like more art or not writing more poetry or not like going on more walks. Like it's like whatever I'm doing today is like enough, and it's like what God has called me to do. And like, you know, like past couple months, like I went through MAP, and it had been like taking a lot of naps and like watching The Office and just like hanging out and like relaxing. And you know, I it's helped me to realize like holy crap, I hadn't slowed down, and like since I was 10 years old, I don't think I had a moment of like true peace and relaxation. Like, well, maybe a little dramatic there, but like in a way, like I just hadn't connected with myself until I found these teachings. I'd just been like searching and, you know, living my life. And so um getting out of that fight or flight mode, like I just really accepted wherever I was at, whatever I was doing, whatever I needed. And like um none of it was like a mistake. Like, you know, even if I took 2 naps in a day, like that's not a mistake. That's like just what I needed and like what God called me to. And Yeah, so like a lot of just like giving myself whatever I need, even if it like without judgment. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I've had a few months where I've just, it feels like I've been hibernating. Like I've been spending a lot of time in bed, taking a lot of naps, watching a lot of The Office as well. um, and there's these moments where I like text my coach, like, is it okay that I've spent all day in bed? And she's always like, yeah, girl, we did some intense work. Like you take that time. And I've been in the same space where just like radically accepting like it is okay, like all the internal work we do, it's like it's probably one of the hardest things I've done in my life. But most people, they don't see it. They don't see like you actively doing things. So I feel like that's also part of like our conditioning. Like I'm only productive if I'm like producing something, but really like healing and giving yourself what you need is also very productive. So thanks for that reminder to chill.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Because like God is peace and like stillness, and um so when we align with that, that's when we're most productive. So yeah, that's and when I'm like healing a lot, yeah, I resonate with that. I rest a lot, watch a lot of Netflix. And I had to learn that, yeah, like both of you said, there's productivity in that. Like there's value in that. I don't always have to be on go, go, go mode to add value. There's value in me just resting. Yeah. So how are you ladies feeling about the discussion? Any other insights? Are you starting to feel complete?
I feel complete.
Yeah, me too. This is really fun.
Yeah, it was.
Agreed, agreed. Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining. For those who joined us live, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are watching from our Facebook page, don't forget to hop over to Church of Union's YouTube page, where you will find all of our previous discussions and lots of other juicy content. And we will see you next time.
Bye.